Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session on the inclusion of smallholder farmers in voluntary carbon markets. We have Emily Ongus with us from Rabobank today, and myself, Natalia Pshenichna, I'm going to be moderating and also give an introduction to the session. So we're about 2 minutes behind, but I will just start with the housekeeping while we're waiting for more people to join. I want to say that we have a Q&A button for you, and during the session, as I speak, Emily speak, and we exchange questions and answers with her, you can ask your questions at any point during the webinar, and we'll pick them up and answer them live at the end of the session. So we're planning to keep the last 10 minutes for the Q&A. I'm just wondering if Nicole, you want to come in and give any more kind of guidance from the organizer side, or you're happy for me to start presenting? I can see that Nicole just messaged everyone in the chat to kind of give similar guidance in terms of managing the Q&A. So I'll kick off so that we don't waste our time and don't take it away from the Q&A later. So our session today is about an amazing opportunity that maybe some of us have been talking about and thinking about, but there are quite a few there are not so many good examples of how this really could be done. And we thought that it's really worth showcasing the best practice from Rabobank today. And Emily here will guide us through the program that Rabobank created to include smallholders into carbon markets and reward them for transition to agroforestry. So this is just our quick agenda for today. So we're going to go through housekeeping that we have done. I'm going to present an opportunity around carbon markets. Emily will introduce a current program by Rabobank. We're going to spend maybe about 20 minutes with Emily on discussing kind of in more depth Rabobank approach and some of the challenges and ideas for the future, and we'll open for the Q&A. So I'm going to start by just doing a quick introduction to the market opportunity and just a little bit about the ACTAC network. I'm a partner at the ACTAC network. We are a consultancy focusing on the intersection of agriculture, digital technology, climate, and financial inclusion. And we truly believe that there is a possibility of a different type of agricultural system of the future, just climate smart and regenerative. So when we are doing our research and projects, we're very excited when we come across opportunities in the intersection between climate, agriculture, and digital, and as well as financial tools. And that's how we came across Rabobank and Acorn and the work that Emily is doing with her colleagues. And I want to just make sure we are on the same page before we go into the kind of details of Rabobank's work. So because we need to understand that when we work in agricultural sector and we focus on smallholder farmers, there is a lot there to appreciate about the impact of climate on the realities of smallholder farmers and the importance of the climate adaptation, but also an importance of climate mitigation. And as lots of traditional programs are supporting farmers in improving their income and yield and access to markets, we also need to remember about a need to add the climate components to the work that we are doing in that space. So when it comes to climate adaptation, there is a range of methods and tools which are recommended for smallholders to use. to adapt to the changing environment. One of those is a reduction of their dependency on the rainfall, so kind of more stable irrigation solutions. It is a transition to more drought-resistant crops and varieties. It is on-farm diversification strategies. So if one crop fails, there is still an option for an alternative income for the family. Introduction of tree cover that improves the shade and the temperature, becomes more manageable on the farm level. It's overall improved seasonal and short-term planning of the smallholder households. And very important aspect is the insurance against extreme events, which unfortunately still has very low levels of adoption in low and middle income countries. And it's storage and logistics solutions, as they allow farmers to kind of go through the shocks more smoothly. And unfortunately, despite the importance of climate adaptation, it's good to know that only 7% of global climate finance is allocated to climate adaptation overall. On the other hand, climate mitigation is much more well-funded kind of activity in overall, and also in relation to agriculture. It's important to also remember that climate mitigation has two different aspects to it. One of those is, let's say, an avoidance of emissions, and another one is more proactive emissions removal. And when it comes to emission avoidance, this is the range of solutions for smallholders that we have been hearing about and kind of been excited about, and those are receiving lots of commercial investment at the moment as well. So those are the storage and transport solutions for smallholders that allow to reduce waste. It's use of renewable energy powered assets, so say solar powered irrigation instead of diesel powered solution. And the improved agricultural practices that allow to reduce the emissions. But there is also an alternative approach to climate mitigation in agricultural context, which is more active carbon capture and storage. And this leads us to projects around reforestation, transition to perennials, agroforestry, and also other types of innovation that increase carbon capture during the agricultural production process. It's important to note and that between those two, there are win-win solutions that allow both the climate adaptation and the climate mitigation at the same time for smallholders, and deliver both types of benefits. Those are the solar irrigation, storage and logistics solutions, soil management practices, but also agroforestry. And agroforestry leads us a little bit more closer to the topic of today's discussion. There is a bigger opportunity around connecting farmers with the voluntary carbon markets. Why is that an important opportunity we shouldn't overlook? Firstly, because there is already a significant amount of transactions on voluntary carbon markets. It's estimated to be around $2 billion annually at the moment, and it's projected to increase tenfold by 2030. So a significant pool of funds that would be great to tap into to support smallholders and their transition. Also, when we look at the credits which are traded on the voluntary carbon markets, forestry and land use in general are double the price. So it's, let's say, on average $80 versus $4 per credit, which also signals that there is a greater opportunity in carbon capture, specifically in agriculture, which could lead to the proper monetary incentives for smallholders to transition to climate smart practices. Because again, like one thing is behavior change and education, but if there is actual money on the table, it is much more likely that smallholders will transition to more climate resilient agriculture. But as an added benefit, it would also result in better adaptation and resilience capacity of these households. So this additional revenue for smallholder also allows them to diversify their income, being able to save, send their kids to school, and pay medical bills. So opportunity is very clear, and it's very exciting. However, up until now, it hasn't been really possible to demonstrate how it could be done, how we can really tap into this pool of funding and start moving it towards smallholders and the direct benefits. And the main reasons for those is that the cost of accessing carbon markets is very prohibitive. It's designed for larger projects. So let's say if there is a cost of $200,000 for certification for golden standard, the most kind of accepted voluntary carbon market standards, like that is the cost that even small and medium enterprises cannot bear, let alone smallholders would not be able, even with if they integrate and aggregate and cooperatives, that's not the cost they're able to take on. Certification also takes a long time, and it's very difficult to understand the change in market requirements because there is always kind of new requirements coming from the market, and while the project gets certified, the market can change again, and you might need to reconsider kind of key aspects of your project. And most importantly, this is the market geared and designed and kind of dominated by brokers that are not necessarily in favor of supporting smallholder farmers, but more like in favor of keeping their own kind of aggregator role. And the cost of the on-the-ground verification of the carbon credits is very high. So again, if we're talking about smallholder farmers, the cost of kind of traveling on the ground to the rural realities, finding the farmer, making sure that they're using the right practices is just too high comparing to the size of the farm and the amount of carbon value that could be generated from it. And also smallholders would need in such transition hand-holding as well as pre-financing to allow them to move to different types of practices. So here comes a great example from Rabobank, which works with certification body Plan Vivo to certify specifically the farmers by working with the local partners on the ground, and allowing farmer to receive 80% of the value of the carbon credit, which is absolutely astonishing kind of design and approach by Acorn. So when we during our research came across this project, we thought we absolutely must document this case study. And it is actually now published as one of the spotlights in the Digital Agriculture Ecosystem Assessments for Tanzania, which is available online. But here we have Emily, who is going to talk in much more detail about Acorn program, how they work with local partners, and what exactly they offer to smallholder farmers. So Emily, welcome on stage, on the virtual stage, and the mic is all yours.
Thanks, Natalia. Good afternoon. I hope I'm audible to everybody. My name is Emily Angus. I work for Acorn in the partnership teams at Rabobank. Been with the Rabobank for about 4 months now, specifically working on account management for local partners in Tanzania and in Kenya. Yeah, my background is in agronomy and extension and advisory services, so I've worked directly and predominantly with smallholder farmers. Natalia, if you can go to the next slide. So ACORN is an acronym, and it stands for Agroforestry Carbon Removal Units for the Organic Restoration of Nature, and it's a program within the innovation business unit of the Rabobank in the Netherlands. ACORN builds on Rabobank's heritage. For those who don't know, Rabobank is a cooperative bank and was founded by Dutch farmers. And so at the core of it is farmer first. And so ACORN follows the same principle and puts the livelihoods of smallholder farmers in the forefront. And some of the aims and the rationale for ACORN is, of course, to help combat climate change, but also to provide clients, and when we say clients, smallholder farmers, with high integrity carbon removal units. So ACORN uses terminology that is carbon removal units, and I'll explain this further. And we also use this via different technologies, and I'll explain this as we continue. So next slide. The model that ACORN uses is a methodology developed together with Plan Vivo. And the methodology looks at helping farmers transition to agroforestry. Why agroforestry? It's more sustainable, allows for additionality for the smallholder farmers, because then, yeah, very good for the climate, very good for biodiversity. The benefits of agroforestry are vast. And so ACORN does the whole process. So ACORN measures and certifies the biomass and then measures the carbon removal units. It facilitates the buyers to the local partners, and then this is sold through the bank's network. And then, yeah, farmers get a very, very fair share of the final sales. ACORN basically, yeah, this is just a slide to sort of highlight the benefits of agroforestry, sort of at the base of it, and looking at the different levels of advantage. And at the very core, of course, is, like I've mentioned, is to improve the livelihoods of the smallholder farmers, and to help farmers adapt to climate change while mitigating climate change at the same time at the end of it, globally. Yes, okay. So a bit of context. I know Natalia has explained a bit on reducing emissions and various ways, and the aim globally right now is to move to net zero, and there are several methodologies to this. And ACORN falls in the nature-based methodology, as I've mentioned, because we used agroforestry, so we don't look at forest or renewable energy or circular business models. We focused on nature-based solutions, which is via agroforestry. And of course, the instruments we use are voluntary carbon markets and supply chain insetting. I won't speak on insetting. Different colleagues handle insetting. I'll mostly focus on the voluntary carbon market section. Yes, again, I don't need to repeat the benefits of agroforestry, but we all know monocultures have their own disadvantage in terms of depleting the soil. They're sensitive to climate change. Of course, there's low nutrient diversity, eventually leads to lower yields per hectarage. And then also risks are higher because the income depends on a single crop type. And monocultures have been known to encourage deforestation. Whilst if you look at agroforestry, it allows for a lot of biodiversity. With biodiversity, then we can have improved soil health. There's opportunities to have different varieties for climate and weather resilience. Of course, there's improved yield per hectare if you have better soil profiles, better water management, diversified income. And of course, carbon sequestration based on the tree varieties that are selected. What makes ACORN a bit different? I know Natalia spoke a bit on the obstacles for smallholder farmers to participate in the carbon market. And these are, of course, high certification costs. The time in itself for certification is quite intensive, and it's not viable for most people to work with smallholders in this respect, because it also needs a lot of documentation and verifications, and yeah, it's quite tedious. Aside from this, there's a lot of monitoring of this carbon as well. So this is manually measuring tree growth, and this is on an annual basis. And sometimes for most organizations, it doesn't make a viable business case. And then one of the challenges that has faced most carbon markets has been smallholder farmers not receiving fair payments. And this is mostly because access to the buyers, but also because of the high costs of the whole process, then the benefit sharing becomes a bit of a challenge. Yeah, and of course, at the end of the day, then the margins are just not realistic. So how does Acorn work, more or less? So Acorn has its own framework, like I mentioned before, that is tailored and specific to Acorn. And we also use satellite technology. So we have a whole team that keeps building on technology. For transparency, if you go to our website, you'll clearly just see all the carbon that has been bought. Like there's a clear and publicly accessible registry. And then after this, of course, then we sell these carbon removal units, and it's quite fair. The farmer gets 80% of total sales. The local partner gets 10%, and Acorn only keeps 10% to cover most of its operational costs. Yes. So Acorn measures the carbon remotely sequestered, and then sells it to the voluntary carbon market. So this is just sort of a stepwise approach to how it looks like. It's a bit more complicated than this, but this is a summary to it. So farmers plant trees, and then the local partner helps to facilitate this process. So these are examples of local partners we work with in Tanzania, Ivory Coast, and Solidaridad in South America, and of course in Africa. And then the biomass is measured, and then certification goes through Plan Vivo, which is our partner for certification. And then the carbon removal units, which the CRU stand for carbon removal units, are then measured, and then the buyers get to buy them. And as you can see, some of our buyers are Microsoft and the Standard Chartered Bank. And then the carbon removal units are sold. Acorn keeps 10%, the local partner takes 10%, and 80% goes directly to the farmers. And once a CRU is sold, it is registered and it cannot be sold again. Yeah, so in terms of potentiality for payments is the share, like I said, the farmer gets 80%. It's about 4 to 6 carbon removal units per hectare per year. And so most of the time farmers will be able to get 80 to 120 euros per year. Of course, prices are going higher now, so that's a really positive thing for farmers. Yeah, like I mentioned, there's a methodology that was developed together with Plan Vivo and a framework. So this more or less addresses eligibility, additionality criteria, and then sort of shows the methodology for quantification. And then this is, of course, verified, and of course, audits are done annually for the different projects. So for organizations to be part of Acorn, like I've mentioned, we work with local partners who then have direct contact with smallholder farmers. So for a local partner to be eligible, one, there has to be a legal right to sell carbon in the country. Different countries have different policy. And so that's literally the first criteria. Acorn projects can include new agroforestry and old agroforestry. And what I mean by old agroforestry is any agroforestry system that was started within the last 5 years. For scale, looking at our business cases, about 2,000 plus hectares as scale makes a bit of financial sense also for the local partner. But also, again, this is a bit of a benchmark, but then it would vary, of course, depending on agro ecosystem and various other factors. Of course, really important that there was no deforestation that took place in the area in the past 5 years. We have very strict deforestation checks because Acorn works on long-term projects. Of course, you can't have sold any carbon credits during this period. There's no double selling of carbon. For the context of ACON, a smallholder farmer is between 0.1 to 10 hectares. And like I said, because you look at long-term projects, the minimum is like 20 years. So then the aim is to create long-term partnerships and hopefully measure carbon annually for the next 20 years for these smallholder farmers. And of course, every farmer has proof of formal or informal land tenure. And again, this we have realized is very context specific. So how do we do this? So once the data has been collected by remote sensing, of course, you have a lot of ground truthing. On the left, you can see one of our local partners in Tanzania. We have a partner we work with who literally goes and measures each and every tree. Like I said, it's a very, very tedious process to make sure that we validate the satellite imagery to what is on the ground. So it's called ground truth data. We've been using LIDAR data to validate the ground truth measurements as well. And then now, together with satellite imagery, we calculate the biomass. Yeah, so the difference with ACON is ACON has very distinct characteristics. It's nature-based. We look at removal. So we look at CO2 sequestered in nature-based systems. So we don't look at avoidance or reduction or allowance credits. It's basically sequestration only. And then it's also exposed. So it's after sequestration after. And so we don't measure anything before. We don't, like, what I mean by that is, like, we don't say we will, no future promises. It's what has actually been sequestered. It's also very transparent. If you go to the ACON website, there's a whole database you can get access to. It's traceable. Like I said, we have a methodology, Plan Vivo, and we go through the whole certification process. There are also, the credits are independently verified by external certification bodies, and farmers get 80% of their payments directly. We are currently active in 15 plus countries across 3 continents. So in LATAM, in Africa, and in Asia. Of course, the local partners keep growing. A lot of conversations are still ongoing. But so far this already kickstarted, and farmers already have had payouts for their carbon removal units. Like I mentioned, we've secured key buyers. So some of them we work with them in offsetting, and some in offsetting and in setting. And this is just a bit of the projections for up to 2050. Why ACON is a bit different once again is it's a bit of a win-win. At the core of it is a smallholder farmer. But then we realize, of course, the importance of contribution to climate change and moving towards net zero. Our values, of course, is integrity. We provide high value carbon removal units, like I've mentioned. It's quite a process, and it's quite transparent as well. And we are very optimistic, to be honest. The conversations are going, and we keep having various conversations every day, and we're quite excited. ACON was new. Started quite recently, and at the end of the year we should have registered about 300,000 farmers in the platform, and that's we can only hope for close to 1 million in 2024. Thanks, and I'll hand it over to Natalia.
Thanks so much, Emily. And I really hope that after this intensive kind of deep dive into Acorn. Everyone on this webinar is as excited as I am about what Acorn Rabobank does. So it's just a reminder to our audience that you're very welcome to ask questions in the Q&A chat, Q&A box ideally. Then we'll make sure we'll find your questions there instead of them being buried in the chat. And now we're going to spend about like 15 minutes with Emily to just like some of the follow-up questions on the presentation. And then we're going to turn to the questions from the audience. So Emily, back to you. So I guess you did mention what some of the barriers to accessing voluntary carbon markets for farmers are. I did mention that as well. But it does I think makes sense to come back to this point because there are so many other organizations that kind of are excited about the idea of accessing carbon markets for smallholders, but maybe not necessarily kind of seeing the ways around those key barriers. So from your perspective, which of all of those potential challenges in accessing the revenue from voluntary carbon markets are like the most difficult ones, and which of those challenges Acorn is addressing with its initiative?
I'd say, yeah, and thanks. Yeah, thanks. I think, yeah, we can reiterate on this one. I'd say the high certification costs.
Okay.
The process of registering and onboarding farmers and filling documentation and talking to certification and the back and forth takes quite some time. So far, the pipeline we have for onboarding any local partner so far is like around 6 to maximum 9 months. And this is not just the, yeah, and this is before we can kickstart any partnership agreements. So you can imagine it's having several account managers and certifying managers working on documentation with the local partner, going through questions, going through business cases, arranging agroforestry designs that actually work. I'm looking at the potentiality of carbon removal units. It's quite a process. And aside from this, I'd also add on the high monitoring costs because after this, then the monitoring has to happen, which means, of course, like I said, ground truthing, and this is counting tree by tree, and comparing the biomass to what was projected or what has been calculated. Yeah. So this Acorn does all this.
And Acorn takes on the cost of the certification, right?
Yes.
Okay, Acorn... so removing this major barrier.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so because you've mentioned the ground truthing, but also you manage the satellite imagery, can we just go a little bit deeper into what kind of digital technology Acorn uses to optimize, to make sure these costs are not like through the roof and it's still feasible to scale the system further? Because I understand that you do ground truthing, but it's also kind of sample based, right? You're not like it's more or less randomized, or if I'm misunderstanding this. So I guess if you can just tell us a little bit more about digital technology that's been used on the ground, but also the technology that's been used in the back office, kind of like in combination, how it allows you to do this in a cost-efficient way. I guess a big question, and I think lots of people here are just wondering, how can I do this as well? And we'll come back to this at the very end. Like, what's your call to action to people? Reinvent this system, or just join Acorn's? Acorn's initiative.
Yeah, everyone can join Acorn, but yeah, makes sense. It's an ICT for Ag conference at the end of the day anyway. But Acorn, like I mentioned, has a whole remote sensing team, and a lot of remote sensing technology goes into measuring this data. But aside from that, Acorn has its own platform. It's called the DCT, and the platform is what we use to collect the data. So collecting farmer information, polygons, recording GPS coordinates, and this is this is a whole system that involves, of course, back-end engineers who build and constantly improve upon it. But also this is what enumerators use. And the local partner has complete access as a project coordinator to the platform. An account manager has access to this platform, and you can see how many plots have been collected, where the plots have been collected, how much land has been collected in the sense, and this is then linked to the remote sensing data, which then measures the biomass. This is outside the ground truthing. So this literally makes it possible to work from a computer in Utrecht in the Netherlands, while someone is in northern Tanzania collecting data from their phone, and it's literally interlinked to our computers. Basically that's the main platform that Acorn uses to collect this data. Acorn has developed its own platform.
And I understand that on the ground partners, they kind of free to use their own data collection apps, and you're working on something to standardize that as well.
No, we are currently only using one app for
one app. Okay.
It's one app, like I've mentioned, it's called the DCT, and was developed within Acorn.
Okay.
And that is what all the local partners
all
use.
the local partners, you collect the same data, same way. Okay.
I mentioned Acorn started, and we of course used other, maybe this is a lesson point. So Acorn started and we used other apps to collect this data. Challenges were coming on board, lots of overlaps, lots of repeat data, lots of lost GPS, weird looking polygons, or like it wasn't, a lot of challenges came with it. It wasn't giving a lot of information. The DCT is very advantageous because farmers can also sign off in the app that their plots were registered. So it's also really good for traceability to avoid repeat measurements or double selling of the carbon as well. And it's in constant development. It's now in Arabic as soon as a month ago. So that's really exciting. Also, it's really exciting for us to see how far we can develop with it as well. But yes, all local partners are currently using one app, and the local partners have access as project coordinators, and we work in platform together.
Okay, perfect. I think this is a very good clarification. And when we spoke 6 months ago with Rabobank, I think there was still a point where some of the local partners use their own apps, and it was about to be introduced the overall kind of one system. And it's great to hear from you why not do that. Like why we want standardized data.
As of last week, we had a newer version. It's constantly being developed. So.
Great. And I assume that, Emily, you're based in Kenya, you're overseeing in Kenya, Tanzania. So my assumption is that another type of digital technology you use on the ground to make sure that everything is efficient and smooth is also to reward the farmers. And we've spoken about just the most fascinating kind of aspect of Acorn for me personally is that the equitability of the design behind it, that the farmer actually gets the majority of the revenue generated. So when you are distributing the payments to them, are you utilizing mobile money in East Africa? I assume it's a given, but what do you do in other markets? And what are the key challenges in using mobile money to distributing the payments to smallholders to rural areas?
Thanks. Thanks for that reminder. This is very valid. So as you know, East Africa has sort of spearheaded mobile money with M-Pesa, and it allows for bulk payments to farmers. It allows for farmers to get their money directly into their mobile phones, and they're able to get this money and withdraw it from agents. In Kenya, it's common practice. It has spread into Tanzania, Uganda, and the other parts of East Africa. Of course, this is the most efficient way of doing it, because then it's also sort of a guarantee that the farmer actually gets the money, because for you to have mobile money, you register with your identification, you register with your mobile number, and you have personal pins. Yeah. Maybe some of the audience knows about M-Pesa. But then the challenges, of course, we are having with other regions is, of course, some of them are still doing cash-based payments. And so this, of course, adds to costs on our side as well, because we have to monitor payments in terms of making sure we have payout ceremonies where then farmers are paid in ceremonies publicly, in the presence of a town hall with the local chief, local administration. It's a whole ceremony, which is really, really good. And there's certification and there's signing of all this information. And in Tanzania, they do it also quite differently, where they have a whole list printed out and it's at the local chief's office. So if you go on the notice board, you can see how much carbon you generated and how much money you're going to be paid. So it's very, very transparent. And that's quite encouraging. Of course, mobile money makes it easier and more efficient. But then, like I said, it's very context specific. Of course, the challenges, like with Tanzania, for example, is Tanzania is quite vast and has more farmers in comparison to Kenya, for example. And so, of course, and they have different mobile telephony networks. And of course, what we are looking at is to sort of build contracts together with local telephony, but then you also have to allow people to have choice. So these are just some of the challenges they're having, or having agents in rural areas who have, in Kenya, we call it float, who have enough money to actually be able to pay out. Yeah, so these are just some of the challenges, of course, with working in rural areas, but not challenges that cannot be overcome.
Yeah, I think one of the tremendous benefits of mobile money is that eventually a farmer also gets the history record of all the payments and could potentially use it for other more kind of advanced derivative financial services as well. But of course, you don't get the benefit of the whole village knowing that you generated that many carbon removal units. And we don't know what's more valuable for smallholder farmer between those two. I want to ask a question because it's specific to your core job. You work with the local partners on the ground in Kenya and Tanzania, and from your presentation, we've seen that they're receiving about 10% of the revenue to cover the administrative cost of collecting data, of signing up farmers, I assume hand-holding farmers through this process of transition, which feels like quite a lot. And I want to understand kind of what's the main value proposition for them? Why do they do that? Like, because it doesn't look like they're gonna earn a lot of money from doing something like that, but it's there must be some other reasons why they're eager to come on board. So maybe you can talk a little bit about like their motivation, and maybe even you can mention like key concerns, when they decide to join in, and maybe they need much more support than just an app through which they collect the data. So I'm kind of just curious because there's such key partners on the ground that aggregate farmers and we rely on. So and yeah, hope to hear a bit more from you on that.
Thanks for asking. So what happens is you work with local partners who have programs already ongoing. So then one aspect of carbon certification is additionality. And so then the carbon removal units are not a standalone thing, but they add to the farmer, hence the agroforestry design. So then when we work with the local partners, we, like I said, it's a whole process. And at some point we do a business case. And within this business case, we also have agroforestry designs. And within these agroforestry designs, we look at designs that are beneficial to the farmer. So what kind of produce will your design also have for you? For example, in Tanzania, we work with a coffee cooperative. So of course, the agroforestry design involves a lot of shade trees, but they're already in the coffee business. So a farmer is already selling coffee to the cooperative. And so what is happening is they're also getting the benefit of selling any carbon that is sequestered from their efforts in making sure they have a more diversified system. So it's mostly really just focused on additionality, and we don't work with local partners who only focus on looking at carbon as the only source of benefit to their system, because it's not really practical. So of course, we look at different systems, of course, in cocoa as well, or fruit trees, or, of course, subsistence is also in the mix, that also goes into the family. So the benefits of agroforestry in itself, and then add a bit of carbon removal to it, so that it's looked as an additional income and an additional motivation for the farmer to produce more sustainably.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. And I guess another question that kind of is very important to ask, otherwise it's going to appear like we buried it a little bit, is that the transition for smallholder is associated with extra cost. So when the farmer needs to access, let's say, trees, then they need to plant it, they need to wait for quite some time before they can get the revenue from it. So it feels like there is some extra effort involved, unless of course they are already kind of like fully doing the agroforestry. And who is financing this transition for them? So is that the local partner's job? Is it Acorn's job? Does the local partner need to find somebody locally, a bank or someone else or a donor who is happy to support such transition? Because at the end of the day, any additional cost for smallholder is significant. So like very often they are not in a position to save for the next season, let alone like invest in their farms. This is one of the key barriers to increase yields, like in low middle income countries overall. So I'm curious how you solving that problem of the transition and the financing for that.
Yeah, Acorn, of course, realized this is a huge barrier to farmers actually adopting. And so Acorn helps to find finance or like fill this gap through various ways. So we'd work with the local partner based on context. Some local partners do not need additional finance, but some actually do need additional finance, initial finance, that's what I mean. Like you've mentioned, to establish new agroforestry, or just to go through the process of establishing or managing the agroforestry designs. Acorn is working on a new finance facility as well. Like really
Amazing.
Amazing. Yeah, really good news. SAF, FCF would be operational in 2024. During the climate week in Nairobi, we got huge support from USAID. SAF got huge support from USAID. And so there's constant discussions with other partners to make sure that this need for pre-financing by the local partners is actually available. And of course, like I said, it's very context specific, but you're really excited for 2024 when SAF will be up and running and Acorn can provide this facility.
Incredible. And it's so nice to also hear that like the donors are stepping in the meanwhile and helping to support, and USAID is doing that as well. We have about 9 minutes left to the end of the session. I can continue asking Emily questions for another half an hour easily, but we promised Q&A, so I'm going to turn to the Q&A box and just direct some questions to Emily, and if some of them are to me, I can take those as well. So Emily, I can see that there is some excitement going on, like how can we please partner with Acorn, or what is the requirements for other parts of Africa, like Nigerian local farmers to collaborate with Acorn. So maybe this is a time for you to say what's the call to action from Acorn to the organizations on the ground working with smallholders or development partners, right? Because you are quite a collaborative entity. That's also something that stood out for us when we were doing this research. So like, what's your call to action when there are people who say that's amazing, I want my farmers to generate more revenue, we need support, we're not going to develop our own system. Like, what are the options for them?
Yeah, I just sent in chat sort of the website link for you to join if you want to register as a local partner. In my slides, I sort of gave a bit of the criteria for what it looks like to be considered a local partner, but we work everywhere in the continent. It's only that I specifically work on Kenya and Tanzania, but the partnership team is huge, and I have colleagues who already work in Nigeria as well. So if you're interested, I've sent in chat, just reply to the contact form, because then there's someone who's specifically dedicated to adding or to responding to local partners, and we can have discussions and chats and see how best we can collaborate. ACON is very open to partnerships, and we would absolutely love to be in each and every country in the continent of Africa, in Asia, in Latam. So please get in touch.
Great. That's the most important message of this webinar. There are a couple of bit more technical questions, like how long does it take for the farmers to start receiving carbon revenue from like the time they start adding trees onto their farm? Could you give us an estimate, like a year, longer, 3 years, like depending on the crop, or what's the expectancy there?
A lot of things are depending, but like I mentioned, some of them are old agroforestry. So if you had planted within the last 5 years, so the delta, so the change in carbon would be measured within the last 2 years. Then that can be calculated, and then again it goes through the whole certification process, goes to the buyers, and then the farmer can have a payout. In Tanzania, we're already having payouts in the northwest, and that's really amazing for us as well. It depends again on tree species, tree variety, management, but like I said, the carbon is measured annually. So as soon as the trees are able to produce biomass, then carbon can be measured and carbon can be sold. That would be my answer in short. Like there's no timeline, but annual measurements are done.
A bit more specific question around upfront costs to smallholder farmers. So we kind of covered it on the financing the transition question, but just maybe you could roughly talk about like, what it would look like for an individual smallholder in terms of like the additional costs.
I wouldn't have specific numbers on upfront costs for a specific farmer to actually transition to agroforestry. I could look that up. Whoever needs that specific answer, I could easily just answer that later.
It's a question, from Shireen Vertime. So I think Shireen can also get in touch with you right on that. But we did cover the opportunity now to transition the cost and the financing facility that Acorn is working on, which should be in the long term. That means that this cost could be financed, and I imagine that in some of the situations, the local partner can support in financing as well.
So we have the financing has different aspects. So there's a farmer package, and the farmer package, the local partner is responsible for any financing related to the farmer package. And this includes what the local partner does on a day-to-day, because then they have different programs running and they have direct contacts with these farmers. So including training and letting ACON know, just letting the local partners know that they have a new program that is ACON. In terms of acquiring seedlings and projects for the future, some of these costs, ACON helps to facilitate via very robust business cases. But then, yes, the local partner has responsibilities, and these responsibilities are tied to what the local partner does normally in relation to how they interact with their farmer database.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. A question also on why is Rabobank doing this? The question, like, are you generating revenue for and profit from Acorn Initiative, or are you doing this because of ESG efforts or something else? So I guess you have given us a bit of a background on Rabobank and how it just goes back to your roots because you are set up to support the farming community. But anything else you want to say in terms of where you sit in this value chain? Because I understand you just cover your administrative costs from 10%, and I don't think you are in there to generate profit. But anything else you want to say in terms of maybe there is a long-term reason you're doing that? Maybe strategically it aligns with Rabobank's vision for their role in transition to the kind of carbon neutrality. So anything you want to mention there in terms of the profit generating initiative or something else?
No, at the core of it is the smallholder farmer, to be honest, because 80% of this money, like I said, literally goes to the smallholder farmer. And like I mentioned, the whole process is quite long and tedious. What Rabobank hopes to show with Acorn is a different process of generating carbon removal units. And it's in constant development, and Acorn started quite recently, and as you can see, the developments are also quite costly. So for now, the main inspiration is the smallholder farmer. The main inspiration is to learn together and to build a system for mitigating and adapting to climate change. And Acorn is hoping to use different technology, so show different technology, because Rabobank, like I said, has an innovative hub, and this is literally part of innovation for the Rabobank, while contributing to the sustainability of our crop systems. At the core of it, Rabobank is a farmer's bank, so to speak.
Great. It's a great reminder. Thank you so much, Emily. Thanks everyone for asking questions, for being proactive. I understand from Nicole and organizers that the recording of the session will be available. So for your colleagues who might have missed and you think they absolutely must hear it and see it, so please share it with them once the recording becomes available. And just want to extend a massive thank you for Emily for joining us, and also to all your colleagues, Emily, for doing such amazing work and also being open to collaborate, because we miss exactly that. Good system, proven, being able to scale, and in favor of the farmer. And answering another question in Q&A, we haven't seen such successful model which gives us as much hope as Rabobank's Acorn Initiative through our research. So this is quite an outstanding example, and I encourage you, if you have possibility to partner with Acorn and help your farmers transition to agroforestry, climate smart agriculture, please do so. Use this opportunity. And thanks everyone for joining again. Thanks, Emily, and have a good rest of the conference.